Hello, I'm Chris,
And I'm Sean.
and this is Monsters and Mythos, a podcast where we take a look at the races and monsters of Dungeons and Dragons and compare them to their mythological and folklore counterparts. Today, we will be looking at the Tarasque. That's right, that creature that a DM pulls out when his players have completed a campaign and he's pissed off he didn't get to kill anyone.
Yeah,
Um,
so a colossal magical beast and frequent big bad evil guy of many D&D session, the Tarasque, the big bad daddy of big bad evil guys, a TPK machine, and many adventurers last sight. Stoked to be covering such a badass creature today.
And honestly, I'm surprised we even are, because I had never heard Tarrasque outside of D&D. And I was listening to a folklore podcast, and they were describing something, and I don't remember which episode it was, but uh, the guest mentioned a Tarrasque, and based on the context, you knew they were not discussing Dungeons and Dragons. So that piqued my interest, and I googled it, and sure enough, there is a creature from France called a Tarrasque. So I mean, it's so iconic you cannot not do an episode.
Yeah, and a Tarrasque, if you're coming from like the French language, is almost like, I don't know. I feel like it's got something to do with like a guillotine or something. Sounds interesting. But
You would think, but I mean, the information I'm going to share, i- it's almost disappointing while intriguing. So, as always, why don't we start with the D&D aspect of it, and then we'll move on from there.
okay, yeah. So what is this big bad beastie? You ask. Well, often described as a scaly biped, roughly the size of a five-story building. Moving similarly to that of a bird of prey, using its strong hind legs and lashing tail for balance, two massive horns upon its head, and a thick reflective carapace on its back. This is one of the more lethal creatures known to exist on the material plane. A true test of a party's abilities, and sometimes it's their last one. When I take a look at the Tarrasque in the various monster manuals, what it reminds me today, kind of like a more modern day reference, is it looks to me like a death claw from the video game series of Fallout. Like if you put like a hard, spiky turtle shell on a death claw, that is kind of what the Tarrasque looks like to me. At least throughout the generations of various editions and whatnot. So this thing is known to slumber deep beneath the earth within some hidden layer for weeks, months, years, even decades or centuries at a time. The when, where, or why questions hovering around the creature are still kind of unknown, but there are a few theories. There is believed to be only one of these gargantuan monstrosities at any given time, and that is usually enough. So, this monstrosity is also known for consuming all in its wake. Not just animals and humanoids, trees and other vegetations, but entire communities, building by building. This is like the fantasy equivalent of a high-scale natural disaster. Most would rather flee than fight this gargantuan nightmare. Am I following suit with any of what the French have to say about the Tarrasque so far? Am I close?
A little bit with the description, but once you get past that, absolutely not.
Okay, good. Okay, interesting. Okay, so the love behind where this thing supposedly the lore, sorry, the lore behind where this thing supposedly comes from is somewhat jumbled, and I think it's meant to be mysterious. As if nesting in some secret, ancient, and potentially magical subterranean location wasn't enough. Its origins within the realms are shrouded in mystery and rumor. Some of the fantasy cultures claim that the Tarasque and its unfathomable capability for destruction are sent by the divine, or perhaps one deity in particular, to punish and purify the land, slumbering deep underground until hearing some kind of cosmic call to obliterate or consume everything in its path. Others speak of long lost and forgotten gods and their squabbles, suggesting that the Tarasque was once used and possibly created by ancient primordial beings and is a long forgotten relic of an older time, also suggesting a possible all-out war against the forces of nature, led by this creature and other gods and whatnot. Another theory of origin claims that, of course, there was once a coven of merciless and evil wizards, and in their haste to master the arcane and the elements, they somehow summoned or created this magical beast, using it to whatever ends before discarding it. Maybe dying, maybe it wasn't controllable from the beginning at all. No sources really say. How's that? Is that keeping pace with what you had found on the French Tarasque?
Oh, are you in for a disappointment?
Okay. Oh man. All right. Wow. So, so why is the Tarasque such a popular like hard level encounter and big bad evil guy? Aside from the sheer terror and the fact that it is essentially a catastrophic natural disaster with legs. The challenges presented by said beastie for the party to overcome are numerous, and often put the party kind of at odds with the way combat mechanics need to be applied to defeat the beast. The resistances, damage immunities, and other abilities offer a unique challenge that is rarely presented to players and DMs alike. From the DM's perspective, you have a single creature that is relatively easy to control in terms of game mechanics, that is able of wreaking absolute havoc upon your players. As this creature is kind of naturally geared towards the destruction of fantasy realms and their denizens, it would make sense that it comes with a decent sized dose of resistances, if not immunities outright, both to magics and damage in general. Much to the DM's delight and the frustration of a lot of players, a large portion of spells used by casters simply just do not affect this creature. Not only that, but there is a chance that if they cast one of said spells, that it is reflected back at the caster or their party mates. You combine that with some legendary resistances, and the Tarasque encounter proves quite difficult for caster types. In some cases, turning their own powers and abilities upon their allies. A firm knowledge of combat mechanics, as well as some critical thinking skills, are almost requirements to fell this foe. That aside, it's no walk in the park for fighter types either. Not only is this monster capable of doing tons of damage per turn, combine that with a potential to swallow PCs entirely, removing them from the battlefield altogether, and creating a different type of problem for the already problematic situation. That being said, with a 15-foot reach, super high armor class, and a multitude of hit points, alongside some basic damage resistances, this thing's like a high-level fighter class's nightmare. Okay, but from a player standpoint, this type of encounter usually proves difficult because, for them at least, it's different than anything they have encountered. Unless you're running like a high-powered one-shot, I guess. So, coming from like a campaign or maybe like a series of one-shots prior kind of perspective, I guess. But their preferred spellcasting and martial abilities, the players, I mean, that have been useful and effective against most, if not all, enemies up to this point, is no longer seeming to be the best course of action. That, I think, is what makes Tarasque encounters hard. Thinking on the fly and outside the box in a situation where time is kind of against you. You know, the longer you tangle with this creature, the lower your success rate becomes. You know, finding and applying a new strategy on the fly, then determining said strategy's effectiveness, and possibly having to reassess this multiple times until you find the right fit is one of the more fun but also challenging encounters. Are you following along there? Have anything to add?
So I've been seeing a meme and a debate, and I think it's a weak debate, but I don't know if you've seen it in the various D&D groups you're part of, but a level 1 Rakokra taking out a Tarasque because the Tarrasque does not have distance attack. Therefore, the Urakokra can just fly above it, be an archer, so ranger probably, and just keep taking pop shots. Now, eventually, a 2 or 3 hour combat, whittling down its health until it dies because it has no recourse. And the two big problems I see with that argument, one, the distance thing could be uh, gotten rid of by having a Tarrasque pick up a boulder and chuck it at an Urakoker. While there's nothing specific in the stat block, I mean, you just take the strength stat, and that boulder's going to hit.
Yeah,
So
that's like a
it's one of
plus
those.
19 or something. Like it's pretty godlike,
And then the other thing is that a 2 to 3 hour combat, I mean, when you're in the game and you're being a hero, within 2 to 3 hours, an entire village, if not kingdom, is destroyed. So, I mean, yeah, you eventually win, but did you really win?
Right, right.
I mean, have
I
you
think I
seen
would have to
that?
take him down somehow too. Yeah, I don't think I could. I don't think I could deal with the level one anything taking down a Tarrasque. Though it technically was possible in older editions with a confirmed critical hit and thereon and forth. Anyway, sidetrack. Really, I mean, kind of in closing, I guess, I'd like to say my favorite thing about the Tarrasque, from a DM's perspective, is some of the lore and narratives surrounding this creature. It's kind of fun to make it your own or take something that you find interesting and apply it. One of the things which being that I liked was that in certain editions, upon being defeated, the Tarrasque isn't actually slain, but has been dealt enough damage to be deterred from its current path or mission of destruction. And instead of dying, it burrows back to its lair deep within the earth for an untold amount of rest, days, months, years. Is it ever really truly over for the big bad evil guy of all big bad evil guys, considering he could just constantly regenerate and come back? I like to think of it like maybe the origin story of the wizards has something to do with this giant chaos lizard, and like it started as like maybe just a tiny little innocent finger length lizard and got stomped on by one of the wizards and then came back just a little stronger and then stomped on again and then maybe it came back a little spiky, almost like like the Borg from Star Trek, how like when you kill them a certain way, they learn to adapt to that, and that way doesn't seem to kill them anymore. It's like that kind of I guess like situation that I kind of I like to entertain that thought of why of that the Tarrasque is so giant and armored and spiky because wizards in the past and adventurers in the present keep beating the shit out of it essentially.
That is definitely one take on it. Just the oh, you beat me with arrows. Okay, now it's harder to hit me with an arrow. All right, you beat me with fire. Well, guess what? Now I eat fire.
Yeah, right. I thought it was interesting. It was definitely fun doing a deep dive into the what and why and whatnot. But what did you dig up on the Tarasque? I'm interested to hear what this French version has all about it.
So while the Tarasque is found in France, it's actually a Catholic folklore.
Of course, it is. The most scary things are.
So in Provence, France, around where the town of Tarascon now is, in the river there lurked a creature. It was described as being a dragon and half animal, half fish, thicker than an ox, longer than a horse with sword-like teeth. Now I've seen some big horses. I've never seen a horse get anywhere near 5 stories, not even 2 stories. So, as you can imagine, this is already a smaller creature. And when it's described, it's actually described as having the face and mane of a lion, a carapace like a turtle, 6 feet with bear-like claws, and a scaly tail like a serpent's tail. And so, while some of the imagery is somewhat similar and arguably could have horns, could not, it is definitely much, much smaller. And the way the story goes is that it is the product of the biblical Leviathan, uh, which is now found in the Monsters of the Multiverse source book. So we'll be able to do a full episode on that. And the legendary Anakis. Now, if you've never heard of this creature, seriously, look it up. I want to see a stat block. Because when I looked up an Anakis, another one I never heard of, it is a creature that throws flaming shit. Why why is there not a 5e stat block on this yet?
Is it like a monkey or it's like a flaming poop monkey? That's crazy.
And it's not a monkey. It's a beast of burden found in Galatia or Galatia, which is around modern day Turkey. And it's a bigger creature, and that's where it gets the turtle-like shell and things like that. But yeah, it's offensive weapon. It's its long, thick, counterbalanced tail, slower creature, spiked club on the tail, and as a defense, shits fireballs, basically. So that's the dad of Tarasque, and the mom
Excellent.
being Leviathan. And so this creature made its way from around Turkey to the river in France and would then destroy ships. And I mean, when you're talking about a river, you're not really talking about large fishing vessels to carry you from England and Europe over to the Americas. You're talking about smaller fishing vessels, possibly something the size of a steamboat, that would sail down the Mississippi. So big, but not huge. And to give you an idea of the size of the Tarrasque that they claim. Uh, One other thing that the Tarrasque has that I do wish the 5e Tarrasque would have is poison breath. According to one source, not really found in the earlier sources, but a later story did put in that it shot sulfurous flames from its eyes and emitted fierce hissing sounds with its mouth, and with its poisonous breath, it killed anyone who came too near. Now, the sulphurous flames from its eyes could be a smoldering, scalding look, just a bright intensity, but a poisoned breath, like the dragon portion. So now you're going to get more of an area of effect, attack, as well as hitting more distant creatures. So that's one thing that I do wish they would bring over from folklore into the game. But like I said, it's such a smaller version. Now, what happened was Saint Martha, who is the sister of Lazarus, who was raised from the dead by Jesus, she came over to France after everything with Lazarus and Jesus coming back, and they sought her out and said, "Come help us with this creature." And so she came down, and when she found it, it was in the process of eating a person. And so most art depicting a Tarasque shows the legs of a person kicking out of its mouth as it's being swallowed. And to defeat it, she threw holy water on it and held up a cross until the Tarasque was subdued. Then she put a girdle around its neck and paraded it through town as people threw spears and rocks at it until it died. You understand why I said it's such a disappointment when you hear the
Yeah, that's not a very
folklore.
epic ending, you know what I mean? It does
I
sound
mean,
like a
when your
badass creature, though.
introduction, and it could be, it's just when you compare it to the 5e version, it is much smaller. It wouldn't have that world ending battle that people have in mind when they come up with a Tarrasque. And really, when you think about it, more than likely, uh, what it is just a story for the conquering of pagan religions in France by the Catholic Church. I mean, we know the story of Saint Patrick, who came over to Ireland and drove out all the snakes. However, there were never really snakes in Ireland, and so it's thought that the snakes represented a pagan mythology and pagan religion stomped out for Catholicism. In the same way, there's been statues of like the Tarasque de Noves dated to the 3rd to 1st century BCE, and it might have been used as a source of worship, a Celtic deified beast, where human sacrifices may have been conducted. And so, by having a patron saint of Catholicism come over and defeat this creature, it is their way of saying, yes, here is the Catholic Church stamping out a pagan religion. And that's really where I think the story comes from. Or at least the source of it is just, it's another way of an allegory for the spread of the Catholic religion.
Well, I mean, that in and of itself explains why it's such a terrifying monster personified in Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to hell. But yeah,
Well,
that was actually a pretty
so
interesting character. Like, a creature in and of itself, just kind of the way you described it, and then it made me think when you were describing like the poison breath thing. I think that would have been like, I think that would have had to have been an improvised gained ability by my Tarasque should it encounter an ornery level 1 Aarakocra. You know, oh, welcome to Godzilla, bitch. Boom, you know?
and I mean the Tarrasque did have a impact. The city of which it now surrounds, the gosh darn it, what did I say was Tarascon, I believe. Yeah, Tarascon. They have Tarrasque on their coat of arms because it's so associated with it. And there's actually a dinosaur called the Tarascosaurus or Tarasque lizard uh, that is named after the Tarasque. It's a kind of like a T-Rex looking uh, from the late Cretaceous period, a theropod. And so, it definitely still has some resemblance and definitely has an impact on a lot of the surrounding areas. But when I heard Tarrasque and I was thinking about it, the world-ending monster actually reminded me more of the behemoth, which is a Judaic slash Christian folklore creature found in the book of Job and later on in Revelations. It is this large pet, basically, of God, so tremendous that only God can tame it. And it is on the land what the Leviathan is in the water. They are two counteractive forces set to destroy the world if they ever fought each other, which is why they are separated. And there's actually a third that I had never heard of until about a year ago called a Ziz, Z-I-Z or Z-Y-Z, which is a griffin type creature. So discuss that more when we get to griffins. But you have then King of the Land, King of the Sea, and King of the Air. So really, you could take then the Tarrasque as a land god demon, the Leviathan or some other sea serpent type as the water, and come up with one, perhaps the rock, or even just a giant griffin, and have that air, and you can create then a trifecta of world-ending creatures.
Something I
And
often think about doing, actually, ending the world, tormenting my players, into a eternal suffering. I think about it a lot as a DM.
well, you're supposed to. I mean, like I've said before, all DMs are of the evil alignment. It's just, the Mercer who's more lawful evil, and the Brandon Lee Mulligan who's more chaotic evil.
True story.
And I mean, the behemoth is thought to have been based off of either a misunderstanding of the hippopotamus or rhino or even elephant in this big creature, the big, bulky, and it's described as a grass eater. However, just by moving around, it's able to destroy, and it has tusks for defending itself. And so I think that's definitely one take, you could take the Tarrasque, and when you upscale it with the behemoth, I think you're getting more of what they were looking for when they created it for 5e.
Yeah, I think you probably hit that right on the nose there. Yeah, definitely kind of a fantasy version of a natural disaster. You know what I mean?
And so, I mean, normally here is where we start discussing how you could take it and mix it with the folklore to change your game enough to make it unique. But with the actual Tarrasque folklore, I don't think you can with much. I mean, you could definitely bring in a fire breath, but just based upon the size, I think you would almost have to nerf the Tarrasque 5e to make it fit its counterpart. I couldn't think of a good way to play it except for, a cult, or again mixing it with other creatures and making it the burden of the land and then having a burden of the sea and burden of the air.
That's actually a pretty good concept, though. I like that. Kind of gives a full rounded experience to like a campaign. You would have to learn how to traverse through three different either landscapes, realms, planes of existence entirely. Maybe gives a good bit of twist to like where you can go and what you can do with it. That's definitely kind of a clever aspect to maybe not have. I don't know. In hindsight, I guess having the big bad evil guy be just the Tarasque alone might not be the best way to do it. There are definitely other creatures out there that are considered hard level encounters. Like the Leviathan, and yeah, it'd be cool to combine them all narratively. Like they were all born in the same clutch of eggs or something. Like that's definitely there's definitely something to it.
Or it's a lizard, water snake, and a bird were all pets of the same reckless wizard who kept finding ways to kill them until they got bigger and stronger and everything else.
Right? Kind of like the Borg theory. Just kept getting better at not dying until eventually they were just uncontrollable monstrosities.
And I mean, we definitely be able to narrow it down more with after the Leviathan, because as I said, it is now an official 5e source, so definitely worthy of its own episode. And then we could talk about what's his name, Jorgemund, the snake of Norse mythology that's going to eat the world. That it's Thor's arch nemesis, and
Sounds familiar-ish.
so,
I think I've read something about that once or twice.
so I didn't want to get too deep into that one, but I mean, again, you're definitely getting into a combination. So yeah, I mean that's the Tarrasque in a nutshell. But as I said, I want to see, and I even looked. There hasn't been a homebrew version that I could find yet on the Anarchus, and that is because a creature that shoots flaming shit like arrows. How can this not yet have its own stat block?
I don't know. We'll have maybe one of our listeners might be able to help us out with that. We'll get a random email one day explaining, maybe with the stat block itself. Speaking of, as we kind of wrap it up, do you have anything else you want to add?
But not on this topic. I think we did a good job looking at the source material as well as the little bit of folklore there is on it. Do you have any questions, comments about the source before we close out?
No, I just once again you kind of managed to teach me something. Yeah, I had no idea that the Tarrasque was based in some sort of actual real world lore. I had always it had always been a D and D bad guy to me. So interesting. Yeah, I mean. Aside from our email, if you guys want to hear me and Chris talk more nerdy shit, or you just want to get down on a comment section somewhere, Tater Brain Pod has both an Instagram and a YouTube channel. So, and yeah, you have anything to add, Chris?
If anybody has questions, comments, or any particular topic that they would like to hear sooner rather than later, because we are going to get through a lot of these or as many as we can before either A, life happens, or B, we decide to stop or even run out of topics. You can shoot us an email at monsters and mythos, all spelled out, at gmail.com. And, we'll respond as quickly as we can.